All right, everybody. It's the Working Fans Podcast with the man they call Dave. And today I got a special guest, former champion. He's been Heritage Champion for Championship Wrestling for Hollywood, American Champion, I believe, for Empire Wrestling Federation.
Yes.
And this guy, he's been on New Japan Strong. He's killing it on NWA Power. He always gives about 280%.
I think we're about 290%.
Jordan Clearwater, man. Thanks for coming on.
Oh man, I couldn't have asked for a better introduction. That was fantastic. I was getting, on fire myself as you were saying it. So I'm blown away. Thank you.
I follow your work, man. I was watching NWA Power actually this morning.
Nice.
Yeah, I was like 280. And
I'll tell you what, so that's really good. I'm glad that you watched because that's why I made that reference. I think I said 285, so now we're at 290 or whatever.
Well, what's great, I think every time I really love his Tyrus, the way he sells it. Every time he's got that look, and
he's amazing. Like if you've watched this new season of Power is different. I mean, I don't know if you follow Billy Corgan on social media, but he posted that he felt that this with this locker room and this set of tapings, I'm going on and on with this large change, but this locker room, this set of tapings, that they've had the best season of Power filmed since the 80s. And that's such a huge compliment to us as performers. But I say all that to say that it only gets better from here. This season that we filmed is going to be off the chart. I don't know if you saw the first episode and just the way that Tyrus reacted when I debuted the new gear, my new gear. And he was, he said, what did he say? He said, "You're like a cold banana daiquiri on a hot summer's day. Everyone wants a sip." Just the way that he comes up with those things, it's so amazing. Yeah.
Well, I think was great about NWA Power in particular too. They're very good at just it seems like they're different. You know what I mean? It's like I like watching it because it's just a different vibe where I feel like it's very authentic. And it's very storyline based, but storyline based like an authentic, everything comes off a little realer. Like when Aldis was champion, it was a big fight feel. Now with Trevor Murdoch, I feel like it's that every man's champion, but everybody's got their own place. And God, I mean, working with Austin Idol too, that's got to be a trip.
Dude, I mean, you couldn't have said it best. I mean, I think what the NWA is trying to accomplish is to provide a product that's just, you have your WWEs, you have your AEWs, you have all these companies on both sides of the spectrum, and NWA is kind of right in this middle road right now. And I think the way that they do that so well is, we're given creative freedom, total freedom to paint on this canvas. And the stuff that's developing from the main event scene to, the people that are just up and coming like myself, it's just been, it's been a way to progress naturally, both professionally and personally, on the camera. So it's been a good opportunity. But man, Austin Idol, I love that man. He's fantastic. Is he not the best?
He's something else.
And what you see on camera is the exact same person in the locker room. I mean, that's exactly to speak to the authenticity. This man is just off the charts. I love this. I love Austin Idol. He's fantastic.
Now, you're working at a young age with some interesting people, and we'll talk about Billy Corgan a little bit too. But I want to just back up because another guy that's pretty influential wrestling that maybe he doesn't quite get his credit, Dave Marquez. I feel like that's a guy you can tell me, but when I listen to him, I feel like he teaches wrestlers and people more about the business of how to act professional. It seems like. What was your experience personally, though?
Dave has been around the industry such a long time, and he's been on every side of the curtain, right? He's been in front of the camera, he's been behind the camera, so he's seen it all, and he's produced these shows. I mean, to think that even today Dave has had a hand in producing MLW, New Japan Strong. I mean, going back to the old days of the NWA, I mean, you can't deny his position in the industry. You're right, and he doesn't get enough credit where credit's due. But to answer your question specifically, I'll give you an example. I watched these two guys have a tryout match before one of the Hollywood shows, and I watched the match and I watched Dave go up there and give some critiques. And the way that he like critiqued the match was so eye-opening, even for people that have been performing or people that have been performing for way longer than I have. And it's just the way that he can describe things and train people. It's great. Yeah, he's been great to work with.
Yeah. Yeah. He definitely seems like an influence. Now, how was I believe you trained with Carl Anderson and Ron Ruffin? Ruffin?
Roger Ruffin. Yeah.
Roger. Okay.
Yes.
So how was it like breaking in and training?
Well, again, I count myself so fortunate because I've been so lucky to have some of the best people around me. I can't describe enough how much Roger had in shaping my career and my personality too. And having the Northern Wrestling Federation, the tradition behind that. I mean, we're talking about people like you said, Carl Anderson, Abyss, Jillian Hall. All of these people came through the Northern Wrestling Federation, and they have passed their experience on to us as well. And you don't have someone that's been running as consistently as Roger has been for 20 plus years. I mean, like every single weekend, it's been insane. So I had a great upbringing there. You know, the Golden Boy came from there. I wasn't always the Golden Boy, but the Golden Boy kind of came out of a play of who I became at the NWF and for the NWF. So great school. If you're in the area, I say go to the NWF. There isn't any better.
Hmm. Now, you were you always a wrestling fan?
Always, as a child, I was a wrestling fan, but I wasn't born around wrestling. You know, I wasn't watching it from like 2 or 3.
Right.
You know, I kind of discovered wrestling at maybe 10 or 11 on my own type of a thing.
Right. Yeah, I was wondering because I mean you have other interests too.
Yeah.
Now, you're in NPC. Now this is like a natural physique bodybuilding competition, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, how long have you been involved with that?
So I found wrestling at like 11,
Yeah.
and as any normal person does, they see that first match and they think, "Oh wow, I want to do that," right? So that's what I want to do. And I thought to myself, "Well, what do I need? I can't go to wrestling school. I'm too young, but I can work out." And so my uncle kind of showed me the ropes of, you know, lifting weights and taught me about bodybuilding. And so it was the only thing I could do to prepare. So I started you know, working out and lifting weights, and it kind of became more of a love and a passion for me. So I always wanted to do bodybuilding, and I never had the opportunity until I moved to California, where I had a local bodybuilding gym help train me, and I got to compete in an NPC competition, the West Coast out here, which is, you're right, National Physique Committee.
Awesome, man. And so you're doing all that. And if you just look at your Twitter bio, I mean, you have a bachelor's in business, if I'm reading this right,
Yes.
and a master's in finance, but you're also, it says you're gonna like, are you still going to school right now? Like, are you in the process?
That's right. That's right. So what people don't realize is when I leave the NWA taping, I go home and do a paper, or I go home and do a quiz, because I'm currently in my master's program now. And you know, it's a labor of love. I went back. I wouldn't have gone back if I didn't love it. Right. You know, I love learning. And so, you know, that's kind of another passion of mine, is just learning and self-development. I didn't need my master's. I saw an opportunity to go during COVID, and so I'll graduate next year. But yeah, I'm in the process of obtaining master's.
That's awesome, man. We were talking off air a little bit, like, you know, just balancing all this stuff. And you were saying one of the main things too is like, if for those people who have a ton of stuff going on in their life, one of the best things and hardest things to do is just to remember to find time for yourself, right?
Right. You have to find time for yourself. I mean, you think about, you have to have, you know, your personal life, your professional life, and your social life, and you only have so much time to spend. But you know, you learn to make do. So, for example, like the NWA, you know, I'm able to work on the flight instead of sleep. You know, it might cost myself some hours of sleep, but you know, I'll sleep for a couple hours when I get there. Or, you know, there's always that time before the show or after the show. If I don't, you know, stay out and party as much, then I can do a quiz or two, you know, before I do anything.
Got a little someone tried to do a run in on us, but that's all right.
That's okay. We just cut them off. It's fine.
Yeah, we got this. um, yeah, man. You know, it's funny. Like I said, you know, you got to work with some very interesting people. Now, I was really first started noticing you at New Japan Strong. Now, correct me if I'm wrong. Was that around the same time as the pandemic? Because I remember you were doing a lot of empty arena matches and stuff there too.
Yeah, so I always say that I care for all the people that were lost during COVID, and a lot of people had it rough, but fortunately, again, I say fortunately because I count myself blessed, but COVID was a game changer for me.
Right.
It really was. The country shut down in March. The country kind of shut
Yeah.
down in March,
Yeah, you're right.
and yeah, and I got the call to work for New Japan in June.
Hmm.
So, it was like 3 months of rest that was probably much needed, like we talk about making time for yourself.
Right.
And then now I get a consistent wrestling promotion that's New Japan
Hmm.
and in an empty arena during COVID. I mean, I couldn't, I couldn't have fell into a better situation.
Yeah.
And so that's when I started with New Japan. And that's really when I got my first, I would say, true break, like, and getting that exposure was with New Japan. So, they did me a solid there when I needed it the most.
Absolutely, and I get that. I'll say this from personal experience too. Like I was telling you off air, I own a little business delivering bread, and my business jumped during COVID because people are just going to grocery stores now. You're not going to
Yeah.
restaurants. So there are, I think the important thing is too. It's like when you're given the ball, you just run with it, right? I mean, you have an opportunity. What are you going to do?
Right. You're not going to not go out there and deliver the bread, right?
Right.
You know what I mean? You're
You're
going
going
to
to
go make the money while it's good.
You're going to go to New Japan and take this opportunity. Absolutely. And now, that probably helped with NWA Power too. Now they're seeing you, more eyes are on you, and it's great exposure.
Right. I think so. I mean, again, COVID in a way kind of had my effect on me joining Power, probably, because they had to do a reset when the country shut down. And right when they did the reset, I had, just had a match with Nick Aldis.
Right.
And that was like so, they probably knew about me at least around then. COVID happened, but I didn't stop working. I went and wrestled for New Japan instead. So, kind of adding more stock, right? Play on gold. Hopefully the stock is rising during COVID. But I mean, it all kind of happens for a reason, I think. And
Yeah.
no story is ever the same. You read all the stories, no blueprint is ever the same on how people got anywhere, right? So it's kind of unique. And I hope that, it continues.
Now, let me ask you this too. You said Nick Aldis there. When you're wrestling a guy like an Aldis, obviously everybody's busy too sometimes during these things. But when you have the opportunity, do you try to get critique from a guy like that in your match, like afterwards? How does that, typically work when you're wrestling a guy with that much experience?
Right. I mean, I'm always looking for critiques because at the end of the day, am I going to be able to apply them all right away? No, probably not. But they all kind of sit and they kind of linger for a second. And then something happens and you think, oh, I put two and two together now. And so, Nick, when I wrestle at the NWA, my agents, I'm always asking the people at New Japan for critique. Did you watch my match? And a lot of them, or a good majority of them, have set aside the time to watch my match and come give me critiques. And I think that's the most I couldn't ask, they shouldn't have to do that because they're in a totally different position, but they're lending their knowledge and expertise, and I never take that for granted. I always tell those guys how much I appreciate them watching it and giving me feedback. Again, I'm not able to maybe process everything at that moment, but it all sits, you know what I mean? And the time's right. I think things start to make sense.
Now, I was going to ask you what it's like to work with Billy Corrigan, but I see in the comments, we do have a question here too. Were you a fan of Billy Corrigan before even working with him?
Oh, yes. Did Guitar Hero 2007. I mean, I think everybody played Tonight. Like, that's a great question, though. I mean, I was a fan of Billy Corgan and the Smashing Pumpkins. I've been a rocker practically my whole life, except for when I was a kid. I liked country for a little bit, but I listened to a Linkin Park song and that became my favorite band. So I really just explored the genre. So I did know about Billy Corgan and the Smashing Pumpkins. But back to your question, I'm sorry.
That's all right. So what's it like working with him now? I mean, at least on this side, wrestling.
He's fantastic. I mean, he speaks all to the creative freedom of the NWA. And he lets us be who we are meant to be and gives us, again, the room to explore. But he's not afraid to approach us with ideas, too. And the best part about Billy is that I think he understands what it's like to be, obviously, he understands what it's like to be a performer. So as a performer or as somebody that has try to do both in front of the camera and behind the camera, I can appreciate that he lets us give feedback too and make suggestions, because two minds are ultimately better than one. And so Billy really fosters that creative freedom, which I think is, at the end of the day, probably one of the most valuable things in wrestling, even more than money, because if you're not having fun, then what difference does it make? Sure, you can get any old job doing whatever, right? But you want to have fun and be able to make a living.
Right. Absolutely. Me and my friends, we talk about this all the time too. Like, you want a certain amount of money for security, but
Right.
you mainly want to enjoy what you're doing too. Otherwise, what the hell? It sucks.
Yeah, man. I'm that type of guy that's like, okay, I need to make X, and if I can do that, I don't care about anything else. You know what I mean? As long as I can cover my bases, like I'm okay. You know what I mean? I don't need to live this lavish lifestyle. I'm fine where I'm at. So if I can have fun doing it, that's what really matters. Yeah.
Is that what drove you to finances? Just trying to managing things a little better? Or?
Yeah, I mean, I knew too with wrestling, nothing's guaranteed in life, and I knew that I needed a backup plan. I wanted to be an attorney, but I decided that would require too much of a time commitment, and take away from wrestling. So I had an internship at a financial firm, and I've always been interested in money. I've always had a knack for dealing with money. So when I got into finance, it was just a natural kind of calling in a way.
Mhm.
So finance comes easy to me, I feel like, and that's kind of why I pursued my master's, as I continue to learn more. Because at the end of the day, if my dreams continue to come true as they have been, then I'll have to let finance go. But at least the knowledge that I learned can apply to my own life. You know what I mean? So it's never a loss there.
Right. And in wrestling, I mean, it is. I mean, it's entertainment, but it's athleticism too. And they'll tell you there's a short window of being an athlete sometimes, right? I mean, wrestling, you can usually, especially if you got the verbal skills, you can make it last long. But there's no guarantees. You never know what's going to happen. So
Right. You don't know if you're going to get injured. You don't know if you're going to get, a contract, if you're only going to make it to a certain level. Maybe you make it all the way and you only last a year. There's been a lot of releases lately over the last 2 years that have turned a lot of people's heads. You know what I mean? Because you could be going from making money to making nothing. Then what do you do? And so that was my thought going into it. As nerdy as I am, I decided to look up how to become a professional wrestler. And the biggest piece of advice I got was have a backup plan. So I thought that might be the best thing to do right away.
that is a good. And actually, in the comments here again, we got another question. What advice can you give to a person/podcast to effectively maybe market themselves?
Um, that's a good question.
Yeah.
I deal with, marketing myself all the time, and I deal with getting a lot of requests from podcasts. So, I don't necessarily know what it's like to be a podcaster, but I think diversity in the people that you bring on helps
Mhm.
expand the audience of your show. Being professional in the way that you outreach and your setup, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
as you said, you progress. You might not be there tomorrow, but you have to be progressing to that level. And I think ultimately just staying consistent in what you do is going to reap some type of a reward at the end of the day, no matter what it is that you do.
Absolutely. And yeah, I'll tell you this from personal experience too. And I just from talking to wrestlers, we also interview comedians and stuff too. And I was telling someone about this day, one of the most common things is it's just a lot of stuff you would do in your everyday life and your other jobs, like, show up on time, look professional, get
Right.
along with people. Like, these should be things that we practice every day anyway, right?
You're right. No, you're right. And that's the same in wrestling. How do you be a good wrestler? Well, showing up is half the battle. Showing up on time is another 25%. Can you show up? Can you be on time? Can you be and look and dress professional in the ring and outside of the ring? You know what I mean? How do you carry yourself? I'm not saying that you have to show up in a suit and tie every day, but at least have some wherewithal on what's going on, like you would for any normal job.
Right, absolutely. And networking again too.
Yes.
Yeah, right. Just surround yourself with that's what I was gonna say, surround yourself with positive people. But one thing too, I mean, again, this is just me made me read into it, but like the NWA also, it really feels like there's a team environment in there with Billy and everybody.
Man, I can say that without a doubt, the NWA and New Japan locker rooms included are the best locker rooms I've ever been in. And it's just the amount of great people, good brothers that are in those locker rooms are insane. there's always a bad apple in every bunch, but man, I have yet to find a bad apple in either of those locker rooms. Maybe I haven't been around long enough, but they're just great, great, great people. Yeah, I can't say enough about it. It's almost like leaving a family. Like you're excited to go, and then when you leave, it kind of hurts because you don't get to see everybody for some time, just the way that we run the shows from pay-per-view to pay-per-view. So, it's cool to have that kind of an experience.
Absolutely. Now,
Yeah.
with the bodybuilding and stuff like competition like that, is there a lot of interaction, or maybe not so much because you're competing more there and like one-on-one type?
Right. I mean, back in the locker room is totally different. You know what I mean? The locker room is a different atmosphere. You have a lot of people that are trying to make it, that are trying to place, that are trying to make it into the pro leagues, And so I came at it from a different perspective. I never came at it from the idea that I wanted to necessarily compete competitively. Would I if I had the opportunity? Sure. But I did my competition and I had an absolute blast. I mean, I was dancing, you know what I mean? I was just a ball of energy because I didn't care about the outcome. I wanted to do good. You know what I mean? I obviously didn't slack off going into it, but fifth place, first place would have been great, but it doesn't make a difference to me. Hopefully next time when I do it, maybe I'll climb in the ranking, but the real fun is in working with the coach and the team. That's where you're pushing everybody else in the gym, and Elite Fitness is where I train at. They're just fantastic people. I mean, they know how to push you or make you suffer.
Yeah, it's funny you say that, but even though it's not like obviously like okay, suffering and physical, but it almost sounds like it's also kind of peace at times for you too, like a kind of like it breaks away, right? Because you're not worried about if you're number one. You want to do your best. You're competing with yourself,
Mhm.
but this is also part of helping you with your other passion, which is wrestling, the look and everything.
100%, 100%. It has nothing to do with anybody else but myself, at the end of the day, as selfish as that sounds. But I'm not competing for other people to look at me. I'm not competing to beat somebody else that's in the gym. I'm competing to be the best version of myself. And I think that's the type of competitiveness that I have in all the situations. I just constantly want to be a better version of myself, whatever that means improving on, disregarding everything else that's happening around me. I don't know if that's the right way to go about it, but that's certainly like where my head's always been at.
Well, then we're both wrong because I understand.
Right.
you
Good.
know?
So there's two of us then. At least
Yeah,
there's two of
absolutely. I mean, there's definitely things where you got to like other people involved and stuff, but like for some of these, like I would say for something like that, like that's an individual goal, and it sounds good to me, man. I definitely think your head's in the right place. It sounds like you got good people surrounding you, and you keep busy. I mean, I
Yeah.
how so you're graduating in 2022 if all goes well.
Yeah. So I finished my semester this year, so I'll graduate in December of next year or January, whenever they do their graduation. But then I'll be done. So I've got 1 year left. I think I can make it. Pray for me though. We'll see what COVID decides for us next year.
Oh yeah, I know. And that's one thing you definitely COVID has shown us like you can't take anything for granted. You never know what's going to happen next for sure.
No, they just put the mask mandates back in here in California. So, it's kind of like, is it going back to is are we going to open up or are we not going to open up?
Right.
It makes me worried about wrestling because I just got assimilated to wrestling back in front of crowds, and now to do a
Mhm.
empty arenas.
Yeah. Yeah, like I said, you've had some getting back to NWA for a minute too. You definitely have like a great locker room there. We've had I think Tim Storm was on here before.
Oh yeah.
You guys, both of you, like you show up a few minutes early. It's like very noticeable. Not everybody does that.
Sure. No, I understand.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Salvanaro too. He was another one that was on here, and he was like a few minutes early and stuff.
You said Sauronaro?
Yeah,
That
Sal.
was great too. He's so knowledgeable when it comes to professional wrestling. Like there's always something that I learned from Sal at every show. And then Tim Storm has been fantastic. I got to wrestle Tim. He's just the nicest person. Like I feel like I've earned the moniker just basically the nicest guy in wrestling, but I think Tim might have me beat. He's fantastic.
You guys are neck and neck. He's definitely one of the good ones too. Now, so you were also part of was it just Talking Shop Mania 2? Were you part of that?
Yes, I was. Yes, I was part of Talking Shop Mania too. I did have a cameo um, under a different character called the Zombie, and I
Yes.
ate a couple people. I'm pretty sure, and then wrestled Taya Valkyrie, excuse me, as
Yeah.
a zombie.
What is that experience like? Now? There's some big names on that set. There, you got guys like Teddy Long walking around and stuff too.
Right. It was just the most ridiculous thing you could imagine, and it's exactly filmed that way. But I was so glad to ask to be a part of the second one because I had a blast. It was so fun filming that. Everyone was laid back. Everyone was cool. We all knew it was ridiculous, but at the same time, we could have fun with it. And I think it's a good comedy. Like it's just, yeah. I hope I'm invited for Talking Shop Mania 3. If there's going to be a third one, I want to be there for sure.
Absolutely, man. It's great. You're getting out there, pushing. Just again, you're meeting some of the other guys and stuff too, and all
Right.
networking. Right? Maybe you get a date here or something there at a show. Or yeah,
Yeah, no, exactly. Yeah, it's always tough to get your name out there, like in network, like you said, but just being seen, but being unseen, being there, but not being, a
yeah.
pest is like the golden, the golden rule for that. I feel like.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, we used to have a saying. I like managed at a grocery store for a while. And I remember the guy who was like the head manager. He said, he was talking about somebody. He's like, did they work for us before? I was like, yeah, you don't remember? No, they were never a problem. Like you always
Exactly.
remember the people who were a problem, right?
Right, exactly. And man, some of them might be good wrestlers, but hopefully, if they want to build a good locker room, they'll be like, "Oh yeah, that one, he was pretty cool." Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Now, um, you already, accomplished a lot in your young career. You're working hard still. What's your goals in the next year? Obviously graduating. But
Yeah. That's a good question. I've been asking myself that a lot. I said at the end of 2020, I did a podcast, and on that podcast, I said, I'm going to the NWA next year. And I didn't even know that they were restarting at that time. I said, that's where I belong. Like it just makes sense for me to be there. My style, my character, everything that I have loved about wrestling is basically the NWA. Uh, and it came to fruition. So I'm trying to think of what I need to put into next year so it also comes into fruition. I think the biggest thing that I would like is just to wrestle more,
Mhm.
and whatever form that might take. Wrestle more with NWA, wrestle more with New Japan, wrestle more independents across the country. I don't know. I would just like to wrestle more. I've had a pretty good year this year, but I'm ready to take it up a notch.
Now, one thing, you're very busy, and obviously you're wrestling too, and I'm sure you watch your stuff and everything. How much wrestling do you get to watch? I bet you keep up with it, obviously, but like, are you able to watch like, wrestling?
Yes, I make time for it, much like you have to make time for everything else. When I was a child, it was not even a question. I was
Mm.
there the last 5 minutes of NCIS so I could watch the beginning of Raw like every time. Like I can't tell you I've seen an NCIS start to finish, but I can sure tell you the finish of every single episode, like for 1,000 episodes straight, probably not that much, um, but I have to make time for it, But I love wrestling, so it's never something that is laborsome, I just torture everybody that I'm with. The other day I watched like 4 hours of The Rock, just the Rock playlist on the
Yeah.
network. I just burned through 4 hours and I just made everybody around me watch it. I did the same thing with Randy Orton too. I watched like 4 hours of Randy Orton like in 2000s, like or like
Awesome.
in the 2000 to 2000 like 7 era. So so there's that, and then I always love going back and watching NWA too. I watch a lot of old
Hmm.
NWA. A lot of my gear was inspired from the NWA. My jacket, Kerry Von Erich, Yellow Rose of Texas, from his championship match with Ric Flair, who's also kind of inspired by my jacket as well, and my ring gear, and just the style that I chose to go with overall matches that era, and I like that. So doing that, and then I try to catch some AEW and some other independent wrestling and Ring of Honor. I don't have like all the subscriptions, so I don't know where to watch
Right.
everything. There's just so much, but I watch wrestling. It's just not as consistent. Like I know what's going on every episode of every show. If that makes sense. I
Right.
play the NWA New Japan. I could probably tell you what's going on
Of course. Yeah, right.
there.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Stay on top of your own product.
yeah, I
Absolutely.
was gonna say I could tell you exactly what's going on in the NWA in New Japan, but outside of that, you know what I mean. Like I couldn't tell you what happened, like maybe last Monday on Raw, but I maybe saw the highlights. I'm not sure.
Did you get to talk it up with Ric Flair at all, or at least say hi or anything?
Yeah, a little bit, a little bit. Yeah, a little bit. I've gotten to meet him before, though. That's not my
Oh,
first time meeting Ric Flair. He does
okay.
not remember me ever, but there was a time where I met Ric Flair in the middle of nowhere, Kentuckyville, where I wrestled a match for a fair. It was just so backwards. I met Al Snow there randomly. Um, Ric Flair was there signing autographs randomly. Like it was the most random thing ever. And I couldn't even tell you what city it was in because I don't even think it was a city. I think it was just like a town somewhere.
Did you get to ever work with Al or near him at all? Al Snow?
I got to work near Al. I never got to work with Al. But he's so knowledgeable, man. Like he's I so I never got to work for OVW.
Mhm.
And when I was in Ohio training, OVW wasn't really that active. So, or at least I wasn't aware of what was going on. So I never worked for them. And then I leave and then they get bought out. And now he's turning it into, a much different product and it looks extremely well. And he's going out there and he's meeting people and you see him on camera. So he's making his rounds. So I think it would be great to have learned from Al. I'm sad that I didn't get the chance while I was there.
Yeah, no, I mean that's because he is. We had him on once a couple years ago when we were starting, which we were so lucky to get Alec in the beginning of this. We didn't even understand how lucky we were. And I ended up just doing some research and even afterwards seeing other interviews with him and like you learn from that guy just by listening to interviews with him. It's like, wow, that's perspective I never even thought about.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. No, he was a wealth of knowledge that night. He actually had given the main event some critiques that I still remember to this day, even though I somewhat make the same mistake from time to time. But it still sits in my memory. So, it's not, I've learned some stuff from Al third hand, but we've had a couple conversations, but it would have been great to have at least worked for him a couple times. You know what I mean?
Yeah, 1,000%. Now,
Yeah.
Jordan, we went about a little over a half hour. So how about this? You got anything you want to promote coming up or even just social media? Tell people.
Sure. So everything is at Clear Like Water, which is what I signed in as my name right here. Everything, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, it's all there. But the one thing I do want to promote, I don't promote enough about myself or my t-shirts that you can get at newjapanshop.com. I don't promote all of that stuff, but what I want to promote though is I joined Cameo for a little time. I've never done anything like it, and I joined Cameo because I'm donating all the proceeds from now until Christmas to the Paws Animal Shelter in Chicago. And that's actually something that Billy helped get us set up for, Corgan, and he's joining Cameo for a limited period of time. But I've always loved animals. I'm a big fan of no-kill shelters. And so I just wanted to go the next extra step and do it as well. So, if you've ever wanted to get a holiday message from me or talk to me or chat me, and 100% of the proceeds go to a great cause.
That's awesome, man. That's a great way to end it. Jordan, thank you so much for being on the show. It was a pleasure.
Yeah.
And I wish you nothing but 300%.
Thank you, brother. Thank you for having me. I had fun. Thank you.
Very much. No problem.